personally welcome Keith back. He was gone that week, and while Pastor would sit up here shaking his head like this, at least I know Keith was shaking his head like this. Sometimes I think he even does it just to keep me going and keep me motivated, and how much I need that. I appreciate y'all's prayers. Keep me in prayer too. Um, I haven't eaten in 2 days. We're going to call it a fast. Be spiritual. It's not a fast. I was sick as a dog. And it wasn't over turkey. I had both my hands up for turkey. I don't care. Y'all bring me your dark meat, bring me your white meat. I will eat it all. I love that turkey. I can have it with giblet gravy. Okay, did I mention I haven't eaten in 2 days? There's probably a little bit of reason for that. Let me pray before I get myself in trouble. Lord, just thank you for letting me be a vessel tonight. Lord, you know the exact time when you revealed this to me, and you revealed these scriptures, and how you opened up my heart to them, and how you give me a new vision on it, a new look to what the scriptures were. And Lord, I just hope that even though these are students of yours, Lord, that that you can reach down, and you can touch their hearts, and they can be refreshed with it, and maybe even learn something new from these scriptures, Lord. And I just love you, and I just thank you. I thank you for everything that you're doing in this place, and I thank you for your hand that's been upon me. In Jesus' holy name, amen. Well, if you want to turn there, we are going to spend a bunch of time in Isaiah, which, of course, we changed our theme. We changed our theme to Messiah. And I'm sorry I didn't have a logo for you. I was trying to find an appropriate one that we had before. I couldn't find it. And so, anyway, moving on. But I want to bring something out. It's Romans 8:23, and you guys know this probably by heart. And I'm sorry, it's 8:24. Apologize. And it says, I don't know if I could put the emotion that Paul has when he says this. He says, "Oh wretched man that I am! Oh wretched man that I am!" The expression itself, he's digging so deep to look inside of himself, and he sees exactly how God sees him. He sees this wretched thing. He sees this disgusting, horrible thing, and the New Living Testament says, "Oh miserable man that I am." Miserable and wretched. And why was he so wretched? Why did he feel like this? And if you look a couple scriptures, before it, you find out that he's opened up his closet of sin. He's just opened it up, and he's looked at it, and he said, "This is the sin that I have in my life. This is everything that's dark and disgusting and ugly with me. Oh, what a wretched man I am. How ugly am I?" I'm using God's eyes, and I look down on myself and I say, what a disgusting creature I am. I can't stand myself. You can keep going if you want to, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. He's so upset. Have you ever met anybody like that? Have you ever met anybody? I went to the store the other day, and you can meet anybody you want at Walmart. They're always there. Somehow they know what time you get out of bed. They know what time you go grocery shopping. But I walk up to this guy that I know. I give him a big old Christian hello and a big old Christian howdy hi. You look into his eyes. All I see is this he doesn't have the depth. He doesn't. He's said, "Oh wretched man am I," so many times in his heart that he's believing it. He doesn't have life in his eyes that I mean, yeah, I know you could see the soul, and he spoke to me, and he's like, oh, Brother Steve, just pray for me. Ever meet anybody like that? Their hearts are just torn open. They have no more hope. They have no joy. They barely have love enough for themselves to get up out of bed, to dress up, to come to the grocery store. You can tell because they had their jammies on. Oh, wretched man am I. Oh, how miserable am I. Paul had to be in this deep, dark place, or at least recognize that deep, dark place, to look at a reflection in himself and say, I am this way according to the way God looks at me, unless I have something else in my heart, unless I have Christ in my heart. But this is the way that God looks at me with the sin that I have. It's so dark. It's ugly to it. We went on a mission trip to the Dream Center. Man, that was a great trip. And I know I've talked about it before. But the people that we met on the streets, I mean, when you go there, they tell you this was going to be some great mega church, but God told us we needed to do something else. We needed to be open 24/7 so that we could provide for the people in the community. One of the outreaches that they have is the Skid Row outreach. And if you've never been to Skid Row, if you've never been there, you've got to see it to believe it. I don't care if the sun was up when we arrived. It was dark. It was a very, very dark place. The sin was just happening right there in front of you. I mean, from people having on the sidewalk right there to selling the crack, pulling it out of places that you wouldn't put crack normally, I guess. They were yelling and screaming and taunted us. We went into the sanctuary, I guess, the streets, I guess, whatever, Mission Street. When we went in there, they told us what we were going to do that night. They told us we were going to sweep the streets. I thought they were crazy, but that's what our assignment was. But their street was disgusting, just absolutely disgusting. How can you love the street if you don't love yourself? You know how you're just miserable. You live in the misery. You start to believe that there's no way to get past where you're at. So it doesn't matter that you're showing out to these Christians who showed up to the missionary, to the mission street, sanctuary. It doesn't matter that you're showing out to them and you're calling out and hooting and hollering to the girls and you're it was dark. They gave us the brooms and they gave us the pans and they gave us the big old trash cans, and we were to go down the streets, just help sweep up and clean up. And that was our light supposed to be in there. And I wondered at the time, I mean, why didn't we do something like evangelize? Why didn't we do something and just walk up to them and pray with them? And of course, I see now that had we gone down there with a spotlight and shine it on them, it would be so bright that they'd be so scared that it would be like the cockroaches running away when you turn on the light on a New York street flat. I mean, they would have scattered. They would have went every direction. They would have been afraid of that light. So we had to go down there with like a flashlight low on batteries and just do something for them. And we cleaned up their streets. And the first thing that I get to see is this huge guy. In my mind, he was at least 10 foot taller than me. and he at least weighed 200 more pounds. And of course, everybody will tell you he was probably about 6 inches taller and maybe about the same weight. And he told me he was going to kill me. What are you doing out here, Christian? Why are you on this road? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to kill you. He used a lot of the F word. I can't find it in the dictionary anywhere, but he used it. And I'd love to tell you I was scared. I wasn't really scared. And I'd even love to tell you that I was Mr. Spiritual. I'm Mr. Spiritual. I wasn't that either. I don't know why, but I felt a peace down there. We clean the streets. We go around. We do everything that we're doing. And as the sun goes down, it gets darker. And I don't mean just that the sun went down and there was no more light. It was just darker. You could feel the darkness. You could sense it. It's like a thick fog that you had to cut through. You watched every corner that you went around. You walked around in 3s and 4s. This is Skid Row. It really is there. And the people on Skid Row, Keith, they had that look in their eyes. That they had no more, not that they didn't have a soul, not that they didn't have a spirit. I know they had both, but I'm telling you that they just didn't have the look of hope or joy or life in them any longer. That's why it was easy for them to act out like that. You care less what you think about what they look like, about what they say, about what they do. They lost I shouldn't say they lost their humanity, it seemed like. They just saw darkness. They didn't know what light was. I met this young boy who was a son of an actor. And up until the point of this, when I was writing up this sermon and stuff like that, I had forgotten about him. When I first got back, I wrote his mama, and I called his mama, and I wrote his mama, and I wrote his publicist and her publicist. The son of a famous actress, was out there in the streets, had just shot up, had just thrown up what he shot up, and had it on his hand. And I can't even describe what it looked like. And that he was saving it because, of course, it had some of the meds in it. So he could take it later. So when his stomach was feeling better, he could take that. Dark. Dark, dark, dark place. An incredible place that I learned a lot of lessons from. And but I see people, like I said, I was at Walmart and I saw in the eyes of people that I knew, that I loved, that's come to this church, that I hugged on, and they had that same look in their eyes. So I have a hard time with that, and that was originally not anything that I was going to talk to you guys about. But God put it in my heart to talk about how dark it was. And how Paul saw that darkness in him, so much so to say, what a wretched man am I. The sin that he had in his life, he says in New Living Testament, what a miserable man I am. He saw those things. And you know what? If you keep saying yourself that stuff enough, you're going to start to believe it, and you're going to end up in that darkness, and you're not going to be able to get out of that darkness. And you're going to find yourself in depression or sick or whatever. I know. I've seen it happen to people. I've seen it. I put my arms around some of those people that I met at the store. Now, I know you're saying yes, Steve, but our theme is for December is Messiah. Well, I want you to know that to celebrate the Messiah is to celebrate a hope in the darkness. It's not just a hope in a darkness. See, our Messiah was predicted to come as a light of hope in the darkness. And I hope you guys mentally stay with me long enough that you guys will get this, because this is some good stuff. Now, like I said, I'm going to be in Isaiah 8 and 9 tonight for the most of the part of this story. But I'm going to recap it. I'm not going to read it out because there's a lot to capture here. Isaiah promises Ahaz that God will destroy his enemies and tells him to ask God for a sign. And Ahaz refuses. He doesn't want to give God. He doesn't want to ask God for a sign. And Isaiah is pretty convincing and gives Ahaz a sign anyway. And that sign is there will be a birth to a virgin girl. In fact, the word they use is almah. Almah. And the virgin will give birth to a son. She will name that boy Emmanuel, meaning God is with us. And God will destroy Ahaz's enemies before the child is able to tell right from wrong. See, the prophet Isaiah is commanded to inform the people of Israel in the prophecy that Sennacherib's plunder and the 10 tribes that were at hand and the Nebuchadnezzar spoils of Jerusalem were coming pretty much right around the corner. All of chapter 8, Isaiah is getting a vision of what's going to happen in the destruction of Judea, and now Israel is being warned through the whole chapter. God, in fact, Isaiah is warned to not fall in the footsteps of the people that he's prophesying to trust in God alone. He who comes will be a sanctuary to all who rely on him, but a stone of stumbling to others. So God warns Isaiah and says, this is going to be so dark and so ugly that I want you to stay on focus. I want you to stay on your toes. He gets a severe warning from God. Don't hang out with the witches, with the wizards, or test the spirits of any of those that don't speak according to his word. Because, he says, there is no light in them. And God warns that there's this huge darkness that's about to come. A darkness that's uncomfortable. Like I said, we're in Isaiah 8, 21 and 22. And you can see how Isaiah, and I'm going to do a parallel here of how Isaiah and Matthew parallel right about this kind of same time frame. In Isaiah 22, it says, and they shall look upon the earth and the person in distress, upwards and downwards, backwards and forwards, on the right and on the left, particularly into the land of Judea, a land that used to be flowing with milk and honey, a land of light, plenty, and prosperity. This is how it used to be. Matthew says, and behold, trouble and darkness, adversity, and miseries of all kinds expressed by a variety of words, and even words fall to express the tribulation of these times, which were such as were not from the beginning of the world. It says back in Isaiah 22, and they shall be driven to darkness. When they endure to escape one calamity, they'll be driven to fall into another. The whole land will be full of nothing else. Matthew 24:16 says, dimness of anguish and fleeing from affliction, multitudes everywhere fleeing from one place to another to avoid a calamity coming upon them. You can look around, you can read the news, people fleeing from one calamity just to be struck by another calamity. There's just absolute craziness going on in Syria. The refugees run this way, they can't get away from the bombings. They run that way, and they can't get away from the airplanes, and they run this way, and they can't get away from the ISIS. We can see that affliction of that darkness and how it weighs down Israel and Judah, and how much it parallels the time that we live in right now. The darkness of this world, where once we had sin and kept it in the dark or kept it in the closet, nowadays it's even accepted as in our community as norm. Just like in Isaiah's time, we are looking for a hope. We have a hope in the coming of a Messiah to bring us out of this pre-tribulation and to come and get us. The King of Kings, Lord of Lords, in Isaiah chapter 9, right after this calamity that Isaiah is talking about, it's looking for the coming of a Messiah. And it's here in the depth of that darkness that Isaiah has been told by God, he will redeem this land and its people. It says, nevertheless, the time of darkness and despair will not go on forever. That the land of Zebulun and Naphtali will be humbled, but there'll be a time in the future when the Galilee of the Gentiles, which lies along the road that runs between the Jordan and the sea, will be filled with glory. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. For those who live in the land of the deep darkness, a light will shine. Are you getting this? Are you connecting the dots here? The people of the darkness will see that light. People who are living in the darkness right now will see this light. The statement right there says that that statement right there is a statement of hope. I don't know about you, but I have to have something to hope for. I have to have something to look forward to. I don't have enough strength in my own. I would end up like one of those people that you've seen just stare in my eyes and all you see is the darkness. I have to have that hope. And I know that you guys need that hope too. Oh, something to hold on to, something to believe in, something that'll guide me through that darkness, that when I say, oh, miserable me, my disgusting self me. And I look at myself, not in pity. I'm not looking at myself because I want other people to, my peers to go, oh, poor Steve. But I'm looking at myself and I literally am judging myself with God's eyes. And I'm saying, there's so much sin here. There's no hope. But yet, that's what I had to hold on to. That's what I need to hold on to. That's what we need to hold on to. We need to hold on to a hope, and we need a Messiah. You need that hope. I need that hope. We all need that hope. We need that light from the Messiah, from the Anointed One. And I believe that without that light, we fall deeper and darker into that darkness. That we won't be able to see the hope, that even though it's there, because it has gotten so dark. That we've seen just nothing but sin, or just seen nothing but darkness. And it gets so dark that you guys have done it before. You've turned off all the lights in a room. And if we did it right now and every light was shut off all through here, projectors were off and everything, there'd be a little tiny piercing of light that would come from somewhere. And that little tiny itty bitty light would shine, would illuminate nearly the room, because you could see that itty bitty tiny light. And I believe I know this is a strange contrast, but that's how I kind of see us when we went down to the Skid Row. If we went down there with a spotlight, I tell you, they would have been running. But because we went down there, we just cleaned the streets. We did what we were supposed to do. We followed the missionaries' direction. That we were that little bitty light, that flashlight that just had a dim light, just dim enough that they would look at that light. They would see light. They would see a little bit of hope. And I believe that what happens is, to the sinners, like I said, they get so lost. They get so much in that darkness, like we saw those people in Skid Row and stuff, that they just don't even see the light anymore. Even that sliver of light isn't even around for them. But God knows exactly where they're at. He knows exactly where we're at. And he knew exactly where to send that light. Knew exactly where. Jeremiah 23:24 says, can anyone hide in the secret places so I cannot see him? Do I not fill the heaven and the earth? Jeremiah 16:17 says, my eyes are on their ways. They are not hidden from me, nor is their sin concealed from my eyes. God knows exactly where that light needs to be. I'm telling you, hang with me, because this is good stuff. That boy that I mentioned, he was so lost on drugs. He was doing them right in front of me. He had a loss of hope. He lived in that darkness. His, lack of light in his life was so bad. Like I said, he lost that darkness. I mean, he was lost in that darkness. And I don't know if I sat next to him for 15 minutes or 25 minutes, or if I would have sat next to him for another 50 minutes or 2 years, if it would have made any difference. But I want to say that it did. That I was just that little bit of light that shined, that God used to shine through me to give him just that little bit of hope. Our Messiah comes to give us hope. We have to have Jesus Christ. He has to give us that hope. And you know what? Our Messiah was also predicted to come from a place, a very, very small place, very, very small from the clans is what I'm going to call it, to bring us joy. See, in Isaiah it said the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. I had no idea why I knew those names, but as I kept on digging, I figured it out. We talked about Isaiah and his answer to King Ahaz in Judah, and we skimmed over a little bit, and we talked about the 12 tribes. We know about them. They rebelled against the king, right? They split off into two nations, Judea, Israel. 10 tribes made up Israel. 2 tribes made up Judea. 2 of the tribes that made up the 10 tribes for northern Israel were Zebulun and Naphtali. Why does he mention these 2 particular tribes in Isaiah prophecy? While these 2 tribes, like I said, they're rarely mentioned anywhere else in the Old Testament. They're never spoken of. God mentions them in Isaiah 9, and he says that these 2 tribes will be in connection with the Messiah. So we have to find out what about this, where did Messiah live? We all know that he was born in Bethlehem. We all know that King Herod gave him a tough time, that they sent a kill force out for him, right? And we also know that when King Herod died, that they were ready to go back to Moses. Joseph and Mary. They were ready to go back to someplace, but they weren't going back to Bethlehem. In fact, King Herod even found out about them, right, through the prophecies, didn't he? He said this prophecies that where the Bethlehem was literally written 700 years before the birth of Christ. 700 years, and the reason why was to pinpoint the city, to give the exact location, not just a general area, but the exact location where the Christ would be born. It ruled out all the little tiny villages in the area that were near Jerusalem, and no matter what you read, if you read the Talmud, if you read the Bible, they all credit the birthplace to Bethlehem. But he didn't grow up there. That's not where he grew up, right? After Joseph and Mary had a dream, they fled. And where did they go? After King Herod died, they went back to where their home, to Nazareth, right? They left there a long time ago, and now they're back to Nazareth. And guess where Nazareth's at? Nazareth's up in that area by Galilee. Some of you have been up there. Some of you have visited that area. And guess what tribes are in that area of Galilee, around Nazareth? You got it. They are Zebulun and Naphtali. We're up in that area. So these 2 are mentioned, and you're wondering why I took you all this way. See, Matthew 4:13 even tells us early in his ministry, about Jesus, town of Nazareth. He went on and lived in Capernaum, which was by the lake area of Zebulun and Naphtali, to fulfill what was said by the prophet Isaiah. The land of Zebulun, the land of Naphtali, the way to the sea along the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, people living in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. See, where did Jesus do most of his work? Up in the Galilean area. Where did he get most of his disciples? Up in that area. Where was his first miracle? Wedding at Canaan. Up in that area. So he fulfilled the prophecy by going back and living in that area. He fulfilled the prophecy of bringing light to Zebulun and Naphtali from Isaiah 8:23 through Isaiah, when you get to Isaiah 9. He fulfills that. He says in Isaiah 8:22 that these two places were a disgrace and an embarrassment, but now this is where the Messiah would come from. I don't know if you're seeing a connection here. From the deepest, darkest place. From the deepest, darkest, ugliest place. So Isaiah tells us where the child born of a virgin will minister. But he doesn't stop there. He goes on to tell us what he'll do. It says in Isaiah 9:2-3, it says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. Those living in the land of the shadow of death of light have dawned. And you have enlarged the nation, increased their joy, and they rejoice before your people. Rejoice at the harvest as a man rejoices when dividing the plunder. So in the day of Jesus, in that day, we're in and around the Zebulun and Naphtali. It was considered very dark, very unlightened, very backwards type land, I guess. That is why, and I know this sounds crazy, I should have known this, but that is why when Peter and John first talked to the Sanhedrin in Acts 4, they were so surprised that these men came from that area. They were unschooled men, unknowledged men. They shouldn't have this. They were ordinary men. They spoke with courage and spoke with power. That was unlike what should have came from that area. Galilea's reputation was so bad that when Philip told Nathanael that they had found the Messiah, what does he say? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? That's John 1:46. Jesus lived in this most obscure part of Israel on purpose. He lived there so that he could drive home that his life was meant to be a very powerful and hope-filled light in a very dark world. That during his ministry, Jesus said, I have come into the world as a light so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. John 12:46. And again it says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but have the light of life. But have the light of life. When I was going through my struggles, 18 months ago, I kid and I tell you guys, oh yeah, I thought it was a freight train when I'd see a light at the end of the tunnel. But I really did need that hope, and I needed that light so that I could have something to hope for, that I wouldn't just see that dark tunnel. And I was pretty claustrophobic too, so dark tunnels were not the best place for me to be. But through that time and years, I stood in that darkness, and I wept in that darkness. And when I came out, though, when I saw the light, the real light, and I saw the hope that I had in that light, I got that joy. I got something that I didn't have before. In fact, Isaiah says clearly that in the hour of their death, the shadow of your death, just when you think it's over, when you have nothing else to live for, and that no one cares, you will find your Messiah. You will find the anointed one. You will find Jesus. And I knew there was a place in my heart. There was a light. I knew it had to be there. It was no freight train. It was a light of healing. It was a light of mercy. It was a light of grace. And even though the nights sometimes were weeping, like I said, when the sun came up and the warmth of the light came on, there was joy in the morning. So first off, I told you that he gives us light to give us hope, and hope in the darkness as it comes to an end. And then God just doesn't stop there. He's a great Messiah. He's a great king. We serve a great king. Right there, even though in that darkest moment, God's shadow, a God that is at the shadow of our death, is what Isaiah said, increases our land and increases our joy. When the darkness flees, when the darkness leaves, when the deep, dark ugliness goes away, when the sickness leaves with it, you're left replacing it with strength. You have that strength. When the darkness flees, and what goes with it is the guilt and the shame and the sorrow, and it's replaced with freedom. And when you get that freedom to live without sin and to live without secret sins, where you don't shout out, "Oh, wretched me, oh, miserable life. I've been given this opportunity by God to go do these miraculous things and to walk and to tell everybody about the Messiah. And I've been telling everybody, but look inside of me, oh Lord, these are disgusting things." That deepest, darkest, ugliest thing is let go. That was hidden in the darkest. When it's when it's exposed to light, then God can deal with it. And you can deal with it. Mark 4:22 says, "There is nothing hidden, but it must be disclosed. Nothing kept secret except brought to light." Job 12:22 says, "He reveals the deep things of darkness and brings deep shadows into the light." 1 Corinthians 4:5b says, "He will bring into light of day all that is present and hidden in darkness, and he will expose the secret motives of men's heart." When those secret motives of our hearts are exposed, and those dark places that are exposed in our lives, and we don't have to shout out, "Mercy me" anymore, and we don't have to shout out how disgusting I am, and all those secrets are opened up, the darkness cannot stand any longer. The light comes in, and the darkness has to flee. Your sin's forgiven, and it's gone. The more light that comes in exposes more areas of your life. The more sin leaves. The more light comes in, the more exposes into your life, then the sin leaves. The more the light comes in, eventually you are shining a bright light. Even at that point, Paul was still calling out, "Oh, miserable, oh, wretched me," even though he'd been doing all these things, but he's every day, little more light, sin goes away, exposing more and more, and it gives us that hope. It gives us that joy. And you see why Jesus had to come from this obscure little itty-bitty town to fulfill a prophecy. It was to bring light in the ultimate darkness. What Isaiah talked about, that deep, dark, ugly place. That's what Isaiah describes, and I believe it was to show us. In fact, he tells us right there, he says, to how to be filled with joy. That when you see that light, and you take that light in, and you open up your eyes to that light, no matter what your past is, no matter how dark it is, no matter how you were treated, how much baggage you have, doesn't matter where you grew up or where you didn't grow up, Jesus is still the Messiah. Jesus can change all of that for you. If God can plan to have his son born in the area of the deepest, darkest, ugliest place, so that he could show you, he can meet you in your deepest, darkest, ugliest place. I knew you'd get it. I knew you'd get it. In Galilee's deepest anguish and gloom, God shows up in a huge way. Pastor's been preaching to us for several weeks about how we lost our shout. And he challenged us how to find our shout and how to find our joy and how to shout about that joy. And he said it didn't matter if you're shouting about your blessings or shouting about the church you go to or shouting about the friends that you have or whatever you're shouting about. Maybe it was even just your church family, or how about the fact that you're even able to go to church. He says just shout, because he doesn't want the rocks to cry out for him, right? You remember him saying that? Pastor, he called us to make a joyful noise even in our darkness. Even in our darkness, we're supposed to make that joyful noise. And I know it's hard to make a joyful noise when you're in the dark, but there's hope that our Messiah brings. There's a joy that's in that hope that our Messiah brings. That's the hope that fills us with that joy. Even in our darkest anguish, gloom, we can shout and make a joyful noise because we know we have a Messiah. We know that Jesus comes not to bring just hope, but to give us joy, and a joy that can be shouted about. So I challenge you with Pastor's same challenge, that if you've got a joyful noise in your heart, even if you're going through a struggle, go ahead and shout. In your darkest anguish and gloom, hope and joy are there because your Messiah has come. Right? I hope you all will stand with me in prayer, please. Lord, we read in the scriptures how you're born in a stable, born of a virgin, born in such a humble beginnings. And we read where you were grown up and how lowly and simple the place was, such a small, inconsequential place. When we question it, we find out that you had me in mind the whole time. All along, you had me in mind. And we thank you, God, for sending your only begotten Son, because in your Son we find hope. And it's in your Son, Lord, we find joy. It's in your Son we find love. Love, hope, and joy. Isn't that the real reason for the season? To celebrate a Messiah who's just been born. Be with us as we go, Lord. Protect us, guide us, direct us. Put a hedge of protection around us. Keep our families and our friends, Lord, until we are in your presence again. In Jesus' holy name, amen. You guys can be dismissed.